I thought nothing could break the bond with my family. But the night I nearly died in a car crash, I realized the truth. When the hospital called them, nobody showed up. Not a single one. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, I thought my family was unshakable. To the outside world, we were the kind of family you'd expect to see in a feel-good commercial. Backyard barbecues on Sundays, laughter bouncing off the stucco walls of our little house, neighbors waving when we piled into Dad's old Ford Explorer to head to the lake. My mom, Teresa, was always fussing over food, endless plates of enchiladas and piles of homemade tortillas. My dad, Carl, liked to tease me about my driving even before I had a license, joking that I'd probably total a car before my first semester of college. And then there was Jake, my younger brother, always tugging at my sleeve, begging me to let him ride *TG*, and even when I was just driving down the street to the gas station. To anyone watching, it probably looked perfect. Messy, maybe, but perfect in that chaotic big family kind of way. People envied us. My friends at school used to say things like, "Man, I wish my family hung out like yours does." And I'd smile, trying to believe it too. But behind closed doors, things weren't as balanced as they seemed. I was the glue, the fixer, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly, even when it wasn't my responsibility. When Dad's paycheck came up short, I quietly covered the grocery bill with the money from my part-time job at the hardware store. When Mom's car broke down, I loaned her mine, biking to school under the Arizona sun so she wouldn't be late to her office job. When Jake wanted to go on a school trip, I slipped him $20 bills I could barely spare so he wouldn't feel embarrassed asking our parents. Nobody ever asked how I managed. Nobody wondered if I was stretching myself thin. They just assumed I would step in. And for years, I told myself it was fine. Families help each other, right? That's what love looks like. But deep down, I knew there was an imbalance. Every time I gave, they took more. Their thank yous were quick, distracted, never lingering. Their hugs felt obligatory, rushed. And yet I clung to the image of us as unbreakable because the alternative, that maybe I was just being used, was too painful to face. I didn't notice how invisible I was becoming. I didn't see how every time they praised Jake for being the smart one or the one with potential, my accomplishments faded into the background. I didn't notice how my parents' whispered fights about money always seemed to end with my name, followed by sighs heavy with disappointment. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that had been forming for years. But back then, I refused to see them. I wanted so badly to believe I was valued, that I belonged, that all the sacrifices I made were noticed. So I ignored the signs. Like when Dad laughed off my acceptance into community college, saying, "At least you'll still be close enough to babysit Jake." Or when Mom redirected conversations about my future to Jake's grades or Jake's science fair project. Or when Jake himself started parroting their words, telling me, "You're lucky they don't expect much from you." At the time, I laughed it off. I told myself they were just stressed, that I was reading too much into it, that if I kept being dependable, kept holding the family together, eventually they'd see me for who I really was. So I smiled through the Sunday barbecues, the family movie nights, the holiday dinners where I did half the cooking but got none of the credit. I laughed at Dad's jokes about my driving, even though they stung. I swallowed my pride when Mom leaned a little too heavily on me, even as Jake got a new laptop for school while I was saving every penny just to keep my old car running. I thought this was love. I thought this was family. But that illusion shattered the night of the crash. The first Rayall warning came in a way so small I almost missed it. But looking back, it was the first domino, the subtle shift that should have told me where I really stood in my family. It was my 20th birthday. Nothing fancy, just a backyard barbecue, the way we always celebrated. I spent most of the morning stringing up lights, marinating chicken, and making sure there were enough chairs for the neighbors who always seemed to invite themselves. When the guests arrived, the air filled with laughter, smoke from the grill, and the smell of corn roasting in foil. As I carried out a tray of sodas, I caught my dad leaning against the fence with Uncle Ray, a beer in hand. He thought I was out of *T when he said it. "At least we don't have to worry about Alex. He's not going anywhere anyway. Steady job at the hardware store, living close to home. He's the reliable one. Jake's the one we really have to invest in." It was said casually, like a joke. But the words lodged in my chest like splinters. Reliable. Not ambitious. Not promising. Just reliable. Like a piece of furniture they never noticed until it broke. I remember standing there, soda cans sweating in my arms, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I wanted to tell myself I misunderstood, but Uncle Ray's nod and chuckle confirmed I hadn't. They saw me as the safety net, the one who'd never climb higher, never shine. And the worst part? They weren't worried about saying it out loud. Later that night, after the cake was cut and the neighbors left, I asked Mom if Dad really thought Jake was the only one with a future. She didn't even look up from the sink as she scrubbed dishes. "Don't take things so seriously, Alex. You know your father. He jokes too much. Besides, Jake has real opportunities. You should be proud of him." That was her answer. Not reassurance, not a reminder that I had worth too, just a brush off, as though I were making drama where none existed. It didn't stop there. The little slights stacked up, each one small enough to dismiss on its own, but together they built a pattern I couldn't ignore. When I saved up to buy a used laptop so I could start taking online design classes, Dad scoffed. "Why waste your money? You're good with your hands. Stick to the store." He didn't even ask what the classes were for. When Jake crashed his new laptop playing games, Mom dipped into the emergency fund to buy him another one. I didn't even know we had an emergency fund. When I mentioned maybe moving out someday, Dad laughed. "And leave us to deal with bills on our own? Who's going to cover when things get tight?" Not Jake. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a truth he'd already decided for me. The first warning bell wasn't a single moment. It was a chorus of small dismissals, ignored achievements, and casual cruelties. And every time I tried to call it out, I was told the same thing: "Don't be so sensitive." I started noticing it everywhere. Jake would talk about a science fair project, and suddenly the whole table lit up with questions and praise. I'd mention a raise at the hardware store, and the room would go quiet, as if I hadn't spoken at all. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Love isn't measured in applause or attention. But deep down, I craved acknowledgement. Just once, I wanted them to look at me and see more than a crutch. The night that really drove it home came a few months later. Jake had just gotten into an advanced STEM program, and my parents threw a small celebration dinner. The table overflowed with food, champagne glasses clinked, and they toasted to his bright future. When I raised my glass and quietly said, "I'm proud of you, Jake," my father cut in before Jake could respond. "Of course you are. You'll always have a front row seat to his success. Isn't that right, Alex?" The table erupted in laughter. I forced a smile, heat burning my cheeks, my stomach twisting with humiliation. That night, lying awake in my small room, I finally admitted the truth. The family I thought would always have my back saw me as little more than background. I was the dependable shadow to Jake's shining star. And if I was honest with myself, I wasn't sure how much longer I could carry that weight without breaking. But I didn't realize just how soon that breaking point would come, or how literal it would be. By the time I turned 21, the cracks in my family's perfect picture weren't cracks anymore. They were canyons. What once felt like casual slights had grown into something heavier, a constant drumbeat reminding me I didn't really belong, not the way Jake did. It started with the money. My paycheck from the hardware store wasn't huge, but I worked double shifts to keep some savings tucked away. One Friday evening, I came home to find Dad waiting at the kitchen table, bills spread out in front of him like a losing poker hand. "Alex," he sighed, rubbing his temples, "we're short again this month. Your mom's car repairs and Jake's program fees set us back. You'll need to pitch in." I wanted to protest. I'd already given them money the month before, and the one before that. But his tone left no room for argument. I handed over $200, money I'd been saving for new tires on my car. When I asked if Jake was contributing anything, Dad's expression hardened. "Don't start. Jake's focus is school. That's his job. Your job is helping this family." Helping. That word had become a chain around my neck. The isolation grew in quieter ways too. My friends started noticing how often I canceled plans because my family needed me. When I skipped a road trip I'd been planning for months, my best friend Marcus pulled me aside. "Man, they're taking advantage of you. Don't you see it?" But I brushed him off. "They're my family. It's not that simple." Inside, though, I knew he was right. The breaking point came one Saturday night. I was supposed to have dinner with a girl from work, the first real date I'd had in months. I even ironed a shirt, something I almost never did. Just as I was about to leave, Mom called out from the living room. "Alex, where are you going?" "Out," I said, grabbing my keys. "With who?" she pressed. "A friend." Her eyes narrowed. "Jake has a group project due tomorrow, and the printer's out of ink. You need to go get some tonight." I froze, anger bubbling under my skin. "Mom, I made plans. Can't Dad or Jake? Jake's busy. And your father's asleep." I wanted to scream. Instead, I drove to the store, bought the stupid ink, and dropped it on Jake's desk while he barely looked up from his laptop. "My date? Cancelled. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I even existed outside of what they needed from me. The real gut punch came a few weeks later. I was at work when Jake texted, "Mom says you need to cover my share of the electric bill this month. I'll pay you back." He never did. When I confronted him about it, he shrugged. "You make money every week. I don't. Besides, you're the responsible one. Isn't that your role?" His words stung more than he knew. Because he was right, that's how they all saw me. The responsible one. The fallback. The safety net. And the more I tried to push back, the more isolated I became. One night, after another argument over money, Dad slammed his fist on the table. "If you don't want to help this family, maybe you don't belong here." The room went silent. Mom stared at her plate. Jake didn't even look up. I wanted to walk out right then. To pack my things and never come back. But where would I go? I didn't have enough saved for my own place. And deep down, despite everything, I still craved their approval, their love. So I stayed. I kept paying. I kept giving. And with every dollar, every cancelled plan, every swallowed protest, I felt myself disappearing. By the time winter rolled around, I was running on fumes. My friendships had thinned. My savings were gone. And my self-worth, it was hanging by a thread. But still, I told myself I could handle it. That this was just a rough patch. That if I kept being dependable, they'd eventually see me as more than the family's ATM. I didn't realize how wrong I was. Because the night of the crash was coming. And when it did, I would learn just how invisible I truly was to them. It happened on a Friday night in late February, one of those bone-chilling evenings when the desert air cuts colder than you expect. I had just gotten off another long shift at the hardware store, hands sore from lifting lumber and hauling supplies. All I wanted was to crash into bed. But Jake had taken my car without asking, again. He claimed he needed it for a group study session across town. By the time he returned, it was almost midnight. He tossed me the keys like it was nothing, smirking. "Relax, Alex." "I didn't wreck it," he said, brushing past me. I bit back my anger, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. I had promised Marcus I'd stop by his place to hang out, something I hadn't done in months. My gut told me I should just stay home, but I was desperate to feel like a normal 21-year-old for once. The roads were quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that makes you grip the wheel tighter. I remember fiddling with the radio, trying to find something that wasn't static. And then, blinding headlights. A pickup truck swerved into my lane. I jerked the wheel, tires screaming, the world spinning. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and suddenly everything was upside down. When I opened my eyes, I was hanging from my seatbelt, blood dripping into my eyes. My chest burned with every breath. I could hear sirens in the distance, muffled shouts growing closer. I blacked out before they reached me. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital, fluorescent lights stabbing my eyes. Tubes ran from my arms, and my leg was in a heavy cast. The nurse said I had 2 broken ribs, a shattered ankle, and a concussion. I croaked out the first question that came to mind. Did they come? The nurse hesitated. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We called them. No one's arrived yet." At first, I told myself it was because it was late. Maybe they were on their way. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. But hours passed. Morning came. And still, no one. When Marcus showed up, eyes wide with worry, I nearly broke down. "You're the only one?" I whispered. He nodded, fury etched across his face. By the second day, I couldn't hold back anymore. I called home myself. Dad answered, his voice groggy. "Dad," I said, my throat tight. "I'm in the hospital." "Did they tell you?" There was a long pause. Then a sigh. "Yeah, they called. Look, Alex, we figured it wasn't life-threatening. You'll be fine. We've got a lot going on here, and Jake has a big presentation coming up. We didn't want to disrupt things." I froze, the phone trembling in my hand. "You didn't come because of Jake's project?" "Don't make it sound so harsh," Dad snapped. "We knew you'd manage. You always do." And then he hung up. That was the moment everything I had been trying to ignore crashed down on me harder than the truck had. All the sacrifices, all the money I had handed over, all the cancelled plans, all the times I had been the responsible one, none of it mattered. The second I truly needed them, they chose convenience. They chose Jake. I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling more abandoned than I ever had in my life. The truth was no longer avoidable. I wasn't their priority. Maybe I never had been. When Marcus sat beside me later that night, I confessed everything. How they used me, how they dismissed me, how they left me to rot in that hospital bed. He gripped my hand and said, "Alex, this is your wake-up call. They'll never treat you like an equal. You've got to stop waiting for them to change." Those words stuck with me, because the real revelation wasn't just that my family didn't come when I needed them most. It was that they never would. And if I wanted to survive, not just physically, but emotionally, I'd have to start standing up for myself. But I didn't know yet just how hard they would push back once I did. Recovery was slow, painful, and lonely. The doctors warned me I'd be on crutches for months. Every step felt like knives twisting in my ankle, every breath a reminder of my broken ribs. Yet the physical pain wasn't what cut deepest. It was the silence from home. Weeks passed. No visits. No flowers. Not even a card. Just Marcus, who came every day after work with fast food and bad jokes to keep my spirits up. Sometimes his girlfriend tagged along, and watching the two of them bicker playfully made me ache for the kind of support I never had. But the anger building inside me was different now. It wasn't quiet resignation anymore. It was a fire. I couldn't keep being their doormat. Something had to change. The chance came sooner than I expected. One evening, while Marcus helped me shuffle back to my hospital bed, I got a call from Jake. His voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, Alex. Glad you're doing okay. Listen, Mom and Dad were wondering if you could transfer some money to cover the utilities this month. Things are tight." I stared at the phone in disbelief. I had nearly died, and the first time they reached out was to ask for money. "I'm in the hospital with broken ribs," I said slowly, every word dripping with venom. "And you're asking me for cash?" There was a pause. Then Jake laughed nervously. "Well, you've always been good with that stuff. We just thought." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't explain, didn't argue, didn't try to make them see my side. I just ended the call. That night, I made a decision. If my family saw me as nothing more than a bank account, then I would stop playing their game. When I was discharged 2 weeks later, Marcus drove me back to the small rental I had been saving for before the crash. I hobbled through the door on crutches, my suitcase dragging behind me, and for the first time in years, I felt like the space was mine. Quiet. Untouched. Safe. I started saying no. The next time Dad called, demanding I pay Jake's car insurance because he's too busy with school, I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said firmly. Silence. Then his voice, low and angry, "Don't forget who raised you, Alex. You owe us." I almost laughed. "You had your chance to be there for me. You weren't. I don't owe you anything." And I hung up. Again. The backlash was immediate. Texts flooded in from Mom, full of guilt trips. "How can you be so selfish after everything we've done for you? Families help each other. Why are you abandoning us?" For once, I didn't cave. I saved those messages, reread them, and instead of feeling guilt, I felt clarity. This was their pattern. Twist my love into obligation. Turn my worth into currency. And I was finally breaking free. Marcus encouraged me to focus on myself, and for the first time I did. I enrolled in an online design certification program using the same laptop my dad had once called a waste of money. I threw myself into late-night lessons, sketching and coding even when my ribs screamed in pain. And little by little, I started to feel alive again. But my family didn't take my resistance lightly. When they realized I wasn't sending money anymore, they started showing up. Jake appeared at my door one afternoon, arms crossed, trying to look tough. "Mom says you've changed. What's going on with you?" I stared at him, the brother I once idolized, now just another pawn in their manipulation. "What's going on is that I nearly died, and none of you cared. I'm done being your safety net." He scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You're lucky Dad didn't kick you out years ago." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "You're right. I am lucky. Lucky he didn't, because now I get to walk away on my own terms." I shut the door in his face. My hands shook afterward, but the sense of power buzzing through me was undeniable. That was my counterstrike. Not revenge, not cruelty. Just finally choosing myself over them. And as I lay in bed that night, sketchbook open, Marcus's encouraging texts lighting up my phone, I realized something. They might try to pull me back, but I wasn't their puppet anymore. They had abandoned me when I needed them most. Now, it was my turn to abandon the role they had forced on me. I didn't know what battles still lay ahead, but for the first time, I felt ready. Because this time, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for me. By the time spring rolled around, I had found a fragile rhythm. My ribs were healing, my ankles stronger with every physical therapy session, and my design coursework was giving me something to cling to, something that was mine alone. For the first time in years, I felt the faint hum of independence. But my family couldn't stand the distance I had created. They wanted control back, and when manipulation and guilt didn't work, they escalated. It began with surprise visits. Mom would show up, pounding on my door with a bag of groceries. "Alex, honey, we just want to help," she'd plead, her voice syrupy. But when I didn't open, the tone quickly shifted. "After all we sacrificed, this is how you treat us?" Then Dad started leaving voicemails, each more hostile than the last. "If you think you can just cut us off, you're mistaken. Blood is blood. You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will put up with you." Jake's attempts were worse, slick, rehearsed speeches designed to make me feel guilty. "You know Mom doesn't sleep anymore, right? She's worried sick. Your *ling her by shutting us out." For a while, I held firm. I kept my head down, buried in assignments and sketches, answering only Marcus's calls. But I knew it was building toward something bigger. My family wasn't the type to let go quietly. The showdown came one Saturday evening. I was at my apartment, half distracted with a project deadline, when the pounding on my door started. It wasn't the timid, drawn-out knocking of my mom. It was violent, unrelenting. I hobbled to the peephole, and my stomach dropped. All three of them, Dad, Mom, and Jake, standing outside like an angry tribunal. "Alex," Dad bellowed, "open this door right now." Every instinct screamed at me to ignore them, but the knocking grew louder, rattling the frame. My neighbors peeked out from their doors, whispering. I couldn't let this become a spectacle. So I opened. The second the door swung back, Dad pushed his way inside, Mom and Jake trailing behind. Their eyes swept the small apartment, judgment etched on their faces. "This is what you left us for?" Dad sneered, gesturing around. "A shoebox and some doodles on a computer?" "They're not doodles," I said quietly, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "They're designs. And this is my space. You don't belong here." Mom's eyes glistened with manufactured tears. "Alex, we're only here because we love you. But you've changed. You're cold, selfish. What happened to the boy who always helped his family?" My chest burned. "He almost died in a car crash, and you didn't care enough to show up." The words hung heavy in the room. Mom's lips pressed tight. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but Dad only scoffed. "You're still harping on that? Grow up. People get hurt, people move on. We knew you'd manage. You always do. That's why we never worried." "Never worried?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "I was lying in a hospital bed, broken, bleeding, wondering if I even mattered to you, and you were too busy with Jake's presentation." Jake raised his hands defensively. "Don't drag me into this. I didn't tell them not to come." "Yeah." I snapped. "But you didn't show up either. You didn't call. You didn't care." His face hardened. "You're always playing the victim, Alex. Maybe if you weren't so dramatic, things would be different." Something inside me snapped. All those years of swallowing their cruelty, of excusing their favoritism, of sacrificing my life for scraps of approval, it all erupted. "I am done," I said, my voice shaking but louder than it had ever been. "Done paying your bills. Done cleaning up your messes. Done being invisible in my own family. You abandoned me when I needed you most. So don't you dare stand in my apartment and tell me I'm selfish." The silence that followed was electric. My father's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might actually hit me. But then, just as suddenly, he turned, storming toward the door. "Fine," he spat. "If that's how you want it, don't come crawling back when you realize you're nothing without us." Mom lingered, her tears finally spilling, but even now, they felt performative. "You'll regret this, Alex," she whispered. "Family is all you have." Jake muttered something under his breath I couldn't catch, then followed them out. The door slammed, the echo rattling through my chest. I sank onto the couch, shaking, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. For the first time, I hadn't backed down. I hadn't caved to their guilt. I had stood my ground. And though the apartment felt emptier than ever, it also felt freer. But I knew this wasn't over. People like my father didn't just walk away. There would be consequences, attempts to claw their way back into my life, maybe even to sabotage me. Yet for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Because I had faced them head-on, and I had survived. The final battle was still coming. But now I was ready. The silence after my family stormed out lingered like smoke after a fire. For days, I kept replaying their words, the venom in my father's voice, the fake tremble in my mother's tears, Jake's dismissive sneer. It should have shattered me. A year ago, it would have. But instead, it felt like a closing chapter. The end of something that had been rotting inside me for years. Still, recovery wasn't instant. I'd wake at night drenched in sweat, the memory of twisted metal and broken glass flashing in my mind. Sometimes I'd pick up my phone, fingers hovering over my mom's number out of old habit, only to slam it back down. Trauma has a way of leaving fingerprints on every part of your life, even long after the chaos ends. But slowly, the weight began to lift. Marcus was my anchor. He never pushed, never told me how to feel. He just showed up, dropping off takeout, sitting with me through long silences, dragging me outside for short walks when the walls of my apartment felt too close. One night, as we sat on the balcony eating greasy pizza, he said, "You know, Alex, family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the people who actually choose to stay." That stuck with me. With the noise of my parents gone, I poured myself into my design work. What had started as doodles on a cracked laptop screen began to take shape. Logos, mock websites, even a few freelance gigs through connections Marcus helped me find. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Meanwhile, my family tried one last time to pull me back in. It came in the form of an email from Mom. Long, winding paragraphs about forgiveness, about how they were ready to welcome me home, if only I would apologize for my behavior. They framed it like a peace offering, but every word dripped with the same old manipulation. I didn't reply. Instead, I archived it and kept moving forward. Weeks later, I got another call, but not from them. This one was from a design agency downtown, offering me a junior position after spotting my freelance portfolio online. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't six figures, but it was mine. I cried when I hung up. Not because of the job itself, but because it felt like proof I could build a future without leaning on the family who had always taken me for granted. The first paycheck I earned there, I didn't send a penny home. I used it to buy myself a proper desk and a new pair of running shoes. Small things, but symbolic. My life, my choices. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Jake had flunked out of his program. My parents had been scrambling to cover his debts, their financial safety net fraying. The old me would have rushed in, sacrificing everything to fix it. But this time, I just nodded and carried on. Their problems weren't mine anymore. And as for me, I kept rising. My health returned, my limp fading until only the faint ache in my ankle reminded me of that night. The nightmares grew less frequent. The apartment that had once felt too quiet now felt like home. I hung my own artwork on the walls, decorated with little pieces of myself, each corner whispering, "You made it." The greatest shift, though, was internal. I no longer saw myself as the forgotten son, the family fixer, the boy who was only worth what he could give. I saw myself as someone who had been through fire, literally and figuratively, and survived. Someone who had chosen himself, maybe for the very first time. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection and barely recognize the person staring back. Not because of scars or injuries, but because of the strength in my eyes. One evening, Marcus asked me what I'd say to my parents if I ever saw them again. I thought for a long time before answering. "I'd say thank you," I finally whispered. He blinked, confused. "Not because I forgive them," I clarified, "but because losing them showed me who I really am. If they hadn't abandoned me, I might still be living for them instead of myself. They didn't break me. They freed me." Marcus nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "That's powerful, Alex." And it was. Because for the first time, I wasn't speaking from bitterness, but from truth. I survived a crash that could have led me. I survived a family who abandoned me at my lowest. And instead of letting it bury me, I used it to rise. Now, every morning when I wake up and see the sunlight spilling across my own space, I remind myself, I don't need their approval. I don't need their money. I don't even need their love. What I need, what I finally have, is myself. And that's enough.